Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really awesome and notable guest on today. He's a design and research leader with over 2 decades of experience in the industry. He strives to improve people's lives through crafting well-designed experiences that matter. He currently consults and advises businesses on design and research through Craft and Rigor in Seattle. And before this, he was in design and research leadership roles at Amazon Web Services, Facebook, Ubermind, and others. Please join me in welcoming Nick Finck. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. This is great.
Awesome. You ready for 20 questions?
Yeah, have at it.
Okay, here we go. Number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah. I think like as an adult in the industry and having been in the industry for a long time, what I find out is like what I thought I would be doing, or what I do ends up kind of forming over the years rather than I want to do X and then my entire career is based on X. And I think some folks that might be listening might be kind of finding that like, oh, that's all strange. I always think of Nick as this UX design person, which, yes, that is at a high level what I do. But when you dive a little bit deeper into it, it's about like the connections with people in the industry, the connections with people entering the industry. Mentoring and coaching is, of course, one of my big businesses that I do with Craft and Rigor, and that has led to this kind of thread that I've seen pretty much on every job I've had, both as an individual contributor, as a manager, as well as what I do now on Craft and Rigor, and then what I did in the past on after hours, I guess I'll say, which is helping others grow, helping others through their careers. And just giving guidance and advice based on my own experiences, but also based on what I'm hearing from the industry, what I'm hearing from other clients of mine, what I'm hearing from individuals inside of businesses, that are making decisions. So that's been kind of the focus for my career. But at the high level, people would say, "Oh, this Nick guy, he's a designer. He probably operates in the user experience side of things, and might do product design." And that is true. But I also think of myself as a connector, and fostering growth within individuals.
Great. Yeah. And just a note for our audience, Nick and I don't know each other until now, but if you're interested in these UX episodes, check out the episode with Dan Segal. Dan and I worked together at Lenovo in Beijing many years ago and user experience. So question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has kind of their own unique story to tell, and I know it doesn't always like come to surface. But my background actually started in film and video. I have certification in film and videography, and that's one of those things that is like a craft of the business. Like as a designer, you probably find yourself doing some level of video work at some point, or designing a video player, those sort of things. So I've been able to utilize a lot of that experience in different ways, and it's kind of come with me as something that has helped me understand kind of how to navigate the design space and influences and decision makers and a number of other things. So that's something I think some folks may know about me, but it's my distant past. But outside of that, I think the other thing that makes me unique is I've kind of done a little bit of everything in the design industry. So I've been a freelancer, I've been a contractor, I've been a vendor for both big and giant companies. I've ran my own agency. I've been, individual on an in-house design team. I've led design teams in-house. Just kind of a bit of everything, including instructor and, of course, now coach and mentor and advisor. And that experience is kind of helpful, in the context of my clients. So when I have a client that are navigating their careers and what to do next, and have some thoughts on like going freelance or whatever, I can share like my experiences, even though they're from the past, and things have changed, of course. But there's some things that I think, I wish somebody would have told me about this before getting into this kind of thing, right? Everything from, going into business with multiple business partners to being an individual freelancer and what the, cadence of work tends to look like on a given week, given month. Those sort of things have all been useful for me to provide insights for my clients and stuff. So I feel like that makes me a little bit different because when you look at a lot of individuals, they either were, in the agency realm and eventually made it into the product realm, or they were always in the product realm, or they're in startup realm. They're kind of like have like a pretty continuous path in a single space. It's only recently, and mostly because of the current, economic market, for, I would say, the job market, more or less, and people becoming more clever, more creative, doing side hustles or kind of gig economy sort of approach, that you start seeing folks kind of branch out from this, I'm just going to take one design job after another design job, right? And I also think there's a lot of folks that have been in the industry for a long time, like myself, and individuals that have come across that are, kind of tired of being the design leader or being the designer and want to kind of try to, create a product on their own or do a startup or, in some cases, actually, I know a couple of folks that like, I'm just going to, start a restaurant or whatever. And so it's kind of interesting to see all that, happen and transpire. But I feel like that's something that I bring to the table. It's kind of unique and different, about me as a coach and mentor and advisor as well.
Great, that's really great. And I think it segues nicely into number three, which is why this of all things, why do you do what you do?
Yeah. So I think, I got into the design space because I was doing a lot of digital art, like 3D, before VRML and all this kind of stuff. So it was way back when. And I saw it as an avenue where I can bring in my digital art, as well as my physical, like I like do drawings and that kind of stuff, and bring that together as well as the writing that I was doing. And I also had a band, so I had music, and I felt like if there's going to be a place where I could kind of combine all this, that was like the web, and that was going to be the next thing. So I started getting into design through basically web development. So I started out as a front end developer once I got on, sort of into the web industry, and then from there transitioned into design. And the thing that drove me in design was something that didn't materialize until much later in my career, which is this concept of the user experience, right? And when that was starting to become a thing, it really felt like this is sort of what I need to be doing, right? And I know a lot of designers would say, if you ask them like why do they do design, what really drives them, and almost everybody will say something about, I want to help people, I want to help them accomplish a task, I want to make their lives simpler, I want to, have services or products that, can help them be successful at not just using the product and service, but like using it to accomplish something else, right? And that really rings true for pretty much every designer I've talked to. For me, I think it kind of is that coupled with helping individuals grow, which was what I already talked about, right? So helping them kind of elevate their careers, helping them find guidance and a path forward, if they feel stuck, or feel like there's no path forward where they're at, or in an industry that doesn't foster growth for designers or whatever it might be, right? That is kind of what I see my interest in design is. It's about the people and helping them achieve something. And so it's whether it's the user of a system or service or the individual client of mine or like a coach and somebody I'm coaching and somebody I'm mentoring. So it's that's the way I see this is that's what really drives me. That's what makes this work interesting to me. And without that component, I think I would just feel like I'm just sort of producing screens or building frameworks that don't really solve problems in the world or don't really help improve people's lives, right? It's sort of disconnected at that point, without that component. And I think it rings true for how a lot of designers get hired is through the growth mindset. If you come into an interview and say, I know it all, I've done everything and all this kind of stuff, chances are you probably won't get the job. And if you came into it more from the perspective of, I have a growth mindset. I don't really have like one dogmatic way to do everything. I'm flexible. I want to learn new things. I crave the idea of learning new industries, new products, new software, whatever it might be. That's definitely something that would probably increase your chances. So this growth mindset sort of thing, and that is kind of all connected there, right? So some of my clients, I help them understand the growth mindset, what it is, and then help them develop their perspective on it, and take their kind of current thinking of, I'm stuck, I just got laid off, I don't have a way to get in, back into a job, I feel like it's a dead end, and helping them kind of change the way they're thinking about things and looking at it as an opportunity to grow and to evolve their skills and to get better at things and to be, whether they want to be a more desirable candidate or to explore, like I said, one of these other paths that may not involve having an employer, may be starting their own thing or creating their own thing, even if it's just a small little product or a project. It can also be a side hustle or whatever it might be, but something that like really drives them and the passion and what they really want to be doing.
I love that. Some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
Yeah. So one of the things I see right now is like there's many avenues I could take. I feel like my close friends probably have heard this 100 times, but it's just there's a number of things that I can move forward from here, and it's kind of all set by fate. Like I'm sort of on this teetering of this sort of tipping point where it could go in many different directions. If I looked at myself in the future, I might be heading up a product company. Another way to look at it is I might be doing the design agency thing again and starting a design agency. I might be growing my craft and rigger business and have a number of clients and be advising a lot more companies, and really growing that from the standpoint of not just being about me, but being about an organization. There's a lot of things that are in the mix right now for me. I have my irons in a lot of different fires, is the way to put it, because they're very different things. And I'm kind of seeing what's going to land. So it's really hard for me at this point with the current market the way it is, and where I'm at in my life and stuff. It's really hard to say, you know, how this exactly is going to turn out. If I could predict it, then I'd be probably investing all my time and energy on that thing, right?
Nice, that makes sense. So number five that we say is unique to this podcast. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Yeah. So, a number of things came up here, from the standpoint of, being a people manager and at a physical office with an, organization of 33 designers and researchers that I oversaw. It just, that was the place that was crafted for us, right? The business had created, this sort of office environment that really fostered code development, and really fostered technology, but didn't necessarily foster a creative mindset. And so one of the things that I wanted to invest in with my organization there was to make our space and our sense of place feel more welcoming to other creatives, but also feel like a place that we could truly be creative and explore. Because a designer's job isn't just sitting in front of a screen pushing pixels around, or creating shapes and whatever, and sharing Figma files. Like it goes deeper than that, right? You might spend a lot of time thinking, just sitting there thinking about something, thinking about a problem, thinking about a possible series of solutions that can solve that particular problem, because there's no one right answer all the time, right? So that's what we did at one company. That's what I created at one company, is a sort of sense of place there for designers. And it had the whole company, every time they would show up on our floor, like an executive or somebody, and be walking by to meet with somebody else. And, it was sort of like, who's here? What's going on here? This looks totally different, and that led to, contributions in the global uh, uh, design leadership across the global organization, where when they were going to be building out new facilities, that they actually created facilities that fostered design spaces. So like sort of war rooms or whiteboard rooms. Places that you could put sticky notes and you don't have to remove them for the next meeting. Things that just kind of made sense for what design needs to be doing, and to basically help foster that kind of innovation that can happen when you get designers in a space that they feel like is their space, right? And they can make it their own, right? So the part about place also is just, as a leader, another part of that is something that's not like physical and visually seen. Okay.
Chris, we hit a
Can you?
glitch. Hello, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. You're back.
Okay. Um, yeah, my microphone and my camera tend to fight each other, so it does kind of do weird stuff at times. Um,
I
that
think,
said,
yeah.
yeah. So that said, let's see. I was talking about fostering spaces, fostering safe places. Um, so I'll kind of repick that up.
Okay.
So as a design leader, I want to make sure I'm also fostering a place for my design team. Both like from the standpoint of uh, being essentially, like, as a design leader, being a shield for my organization from politics, bureaucracy, roadblocks and things that may be thrown at them, or perspectives and views about how design should operate, from other forces inside the business, that are not necessarily part of the design organization. So, that's one of the things I think is important, because I find the most innovation happens when you're willing to take risks. And with risk comes a sense of concern of failure, right? And so you have to create a place where it's okay to fail. I'm not necessarily saying you need to celebrate it. I know some companies like to do that, they celebrate failure. I think there is some level of value in failure, that you learn something new from that. Like, okay, we learned at least one way not to do something, and I get that, but I also think that if we're not failing, we're probably not pushing ourselves hard enough. We're probably not, really taking risks and exploring things that we, thought would maybe be less likely to occur or happen, or, like, and this could be everything from a how do we execute a specific design on a specific screen, to how do we think about this product and the model of the product in terms of how it works as a platform with our customers. So you have to really create a space that is protected to be able to do that, because the last thing you need is, here's this innovative idea, and it's getting crushed by leadership because, it didn't quite hit the numbers they wanted it to hit. But yet this is like an experiment in a lot of ways. I think that's the beauty of digital, right? Is that you can update things. It doesn't have to, you don't just launch it and forget about it. It's not print. You can't, say that you can't continue to edit. You can continue to evolve the things, right? And so we need to try and test things and then, sort of experiment in that way. But we have to have a safe place for people to be able to feel comfortable doing that and not risk like losing their jobs or whatever it might be out of that process. So when I think of place, that's one of the things that also comes to mind. And now like my place, like physically, is home office, working from home, or I have a little cabin up in the woods, in the mountains, and working from there. I actually got fiber there, which is kind of, I feel lucky about that. But having a nice environment to be able to do some work and get some things done is pretty important. But I don't necessarily know that like all businesses really think about it that way. They don't really think about the different modes of operation that an individual might go through in a given week or day even. And so we need to make sure we're one, you know shielding ourselves from any kind of forces that may slow us down, may guide us too strongly in a direction that may or may not really show the potential of what design can do. And we also need to make sure we have a little bit of mental safety and be good to ourselves, health wise, because without that, I feel like burnout happens real fast, right? We get exhausted from that. So I feel like creating creative spaces that inspire us, and helping really push the craft forward and get back to what design can really accomplish, rather than the what can design just deliver on today, right? So that's where I think we see some interesting work being done.
That's great. Just to reflect a bit, we have with place, we have the geographic place, and sometimes we have this kind of philosophical place, but it's not often we hear about making places, especially making places for other people. So I think that's really unique and interesting.
Mhm.
So number six, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've had a lot of people like ask me that, like in a couple different scenarios. Like when I started a nonprofit, when I started my own agency, a for-profit agency, or a business really, um, you know, because they went down these different paths, right? And there's this notion of like, oh well, like if you could tell yourself something, you might have been able to like not have that happen or not have it go that direction or whatever. I don't really think that's really true. I think sort of we as individuals tend to go down the paths that we're going to go down. We're in charge of our own destiny, obviously, but like I think there's there's sort of this notion that like these things went wrong and then you ended up here because of that. Sometimes that's actually a good thing, right? The end result can sometimes, like I mentioned, like people getting laid off. That's no fun matter. I mean, I've been there. I've lived it. I'm living it now in some ways. So but it gives you the opportunity to learn from things. And I look back at like my agency experience when I ran my own agency with a couple other folks originally, and then down to just me at the end, and then the acquisition of my agency. I don't think I would change anything about it because I learned a lot about it. I learned about people. I learned about dynamics. I learned about business and growing business. I learned about a number of things that I felt like if I hadn't done that, I might not have been able to do the things I did later in my career, right? So, sort of cause and effect sort of thing going on there, right? And I don't really believe in this notion of like clean up our past kind of thing. I think we need to own it and live up to what has happened in the past and take accountability and responsibility for that. If things went bad, and also learn from it, right? And then we move forward because it's water under the bridge, right? Nothing you could do today is going to change what happened in the past. What you can control is what's going to happen next for you at that moment, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't really have like a, I would go back and tell myself XYZ, or, you know, don't invest in this thing, or, or whatever, like it just wouldn't go down that way. I don't, as much as I'm a fan of like, movies like Back to the Future and all that funness that happens with that. I just really feel like, yeah, I am who I am today because of my experiences in the past.
That's great, and I feel like you're foreshadowing some of the further questions. So this is super fun. So number seven, what's a day in your life like?
Yeah, so right now it's a little crazy. So I'll just kind of give a high level. I wake up pretty early in the morning. I've got two kids. One is in kindergarten, and one is 2 years old. I am a full-time stay-at-home dad. So my 2 year old, basically, I do crafts and hobbies with her. I, am responsible for her learning and development and exploring things, like even just like exposure to, this is the color yellow, this is a square, basic things like that, right? Where my son, he went through a preschool, so we were kind of fortunate with that, and they had a very structured like learning process. But at the age of 2, you're not really expected to learn too much. And what I see with my daughter is, I almost feel like if we're not teaching her new things, and we're not trying to like try something new or explore something new with her, that we're almost doing a disservice. That I feel like she can actually grow and develop her understanding of the world around her faster the more we expose her to different things, like, hey, let's do some painting, let's talk about these colors. Not that I'm like necessarily going in and talking to my daughter about like the Munsell system or hue and saturation or whatever, but at the same time, like, I find like there's some stuff that I've been able to teach her that like a lot of 2 year olds probably wouldn't be able to do right now. And it's not that they weren't capable of it, it's just that the programs and the frameworks for learning in our world are created by institutions and organizations, and they don't really have an understanding of like really humans and the human brain and its capabilities of how it could learn and process and at what stage. And everybody's a little bit different, right? So I think that's one of the things I find interesting is, we spend good 20 plus years or whatever it is, of our lives, going through institutional models that were created ages ago, that yes, have been revamped and refreshed with new material, new approaches. But there's sort of this idea of, this is how you learn, right? And the reality is like, this didn't always, this wasn't always the case. And yeah, people are more educated now, which is good. So we do have a framework. So it is good in that regard, but also, are we limiting ourselves? Are we limiting our capabilities of what we can do, what is possible with, just the human spirit, right? And what people are capable of on an individual level, right? So this goes back, and this is like a deep cut, but this goes back to a teacher I had in high school. She was an English teacher. And I mean, I had other great English teachers too, and other great teachers too, but this one in particular stands out because I didn't really ever do great in English. And when I got into this class with this particular teacher, I did a few assignments, and she recognized my writing as pretty creative and pretty interesting. And she just allowed me to just kind of explore that, just to like see where that goes, right? And so I found myself like writing tons of stuff in my English class, rather than boilerplate curriculum, right? And some people would argue, okay, well, maybe I didn't learn what I needed to learn in the class, but I felt like I was able to keep up with the class of whatever else they were also learning. But I was able to, more importantly, exercise that muscle. Everybody talks about the brain being a muscle and needs to be exercised. Well, if you want to be like, say, a professional writer, you've got to practice writing, right? And yeah, English class does some of that, but they also have a lot of reading, a lot of teaching, about different things, so it doesn't, necessarily get in the way. But if you give it a full avenue to just like go wild with this, figure out what you want to do, write about whatever you want to write about. And man, I explored all kinds of interesting topics that, I think even as an adult, like, I don't even know the answers to half of that stuff, and even how that stuff works, but I know I explored it when I was a kid. So I think there's something, to be said there, about learning, right? So all this to say, I'm kind of circling back around to where we were at with the day in a life. Like so my daughter goes to bed and then I switch into another mode. So I have multiple things I do. I start to move into my mentoring and coaching services. I do my business advising services then. This all happens when my daughter is napping, believe it or not, much like today's podcast, right? And then at some point, my son comes home, and then all chaos ensues because there's now two of them, and they're running rampant around the house, right? But I also try to make sure that they're able to do some fun stuff and really just kind of be kids, right? Because I think there's so much pressure right now for kids to like do certain things, to accomplish certain things, and to be at a certain skill level. We've got aptitude tests and all this sort of stuff. My kids in kindergarten, he's taking exams that are evaluating his capability of where he's at learn in terms of growth and learning, right? And he's stressed about it, right? And so the last thing I want to do is when he comes home, like yeah, he has to do his homework at some point, but like let's do something fun, let's do something creative, let's do something that's like not like the rigid framework of school, right? He's been able to show a lot of like creative ingenuity on a lot of things. But and my daughter too. And so that's kind of like a typical day. And then at night, it's like dinner. It's like a marathon of things, right? It's like dinner. Maybe a little playtime. We just got a new puppy, so there's playing with the puppy, making sure the puppy gets walked, all that kind of fun stuff. Cleaning up after the puppy because he's not she's not potty trained yet, so there's a little bit of that. But after that, then it's cleaning up dinner, getting the kids to bed and bath, and all that sort of stuff, and then night hits and it's like kind of calm in the house, and then I get to unwind a little bit, and yeah, and then I kind of am a bit of a night owl, so I'll watch some shows and stuff, but I'm also like exploring other things, learning other things. I'm usually online, kind of hey, what's this thing that I heard about today, and like just kind of go deep into it, if I want to learn more about something, and just kind of make sure that like even though I'm 25 years into design, I want to make sure I'm learning something new every day. So whether it's in design or beyond design, that's always something I think is helpful for me. That's a high level, and I know a lot of story there, but like high level of like kind of a day in the life of me on a typical weekday, I guess I would say.
I love that. And you really answered number eight already, but the question is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely have a growth mindset. I feel like, 25 years in, I don't necessarily know it all. I'm still learning things new every day, even about like fundamental core design, right? Like, and that's just one of those things where, I think a lot of people might have like graphic design backgrounds and they kind of feel like, oh, that's different than like digital product design and UX design. And, some people don't value it. And when I look at it as like a hiring manager, as a design leader, I'm like, I actually value it because I know those foundational things. So there's value in this sort of stuff. Like this person knows color theory and they're not just saying it, right? And they don't amount color theory to just creating a color palette, right? That there's a deeper emotional response to color, right? And there's all sorts of other things. Learned behavior responses to color, behavioral responses to color. So that said, how do I keep up to date? How do I learn about new things? Well, I there's a number of avenues. Some of them I don't necessarily recommend, but one of them is social media, right? I'm pretty active on a number of social media platforms. I'm actually starting to use Threads probably the most now, aside from like say LinkedIn. But I'm not really like a content creator on LinkedIn or anything like that. On Threads, I talk a lot about design. I see a lot of conversations about design. I see a lot of interesting posts and insight about design. I'm constantly resharing that and all that sort of stuff. So I get a lot of people following me just because of I'm kind of tapped into the design industry that way. And even more so on Twitter. There's like a gazillion more followers that I have on Twitter. I don't even know how, but just there's a lot of people following me there, and I talk about design there. I talk about things that are like mean something in our industry. that provide value with the craft of design and help move design forward rather than let's debate this thing for the 100th time, right? Or bringing up a topic that is absolutely like a hot button topic that is going to trigger people and they're going to want to respond just for the sake of engagement. I don't do those things. Instead, I'm looking at like, let's have a conversation about something that's meaningful, that
Mm.
is important, that's in the current now of how design is operating in the world and in a lot of companies, right? And that drives more interesting conversation. But that is the public space, right? Like these social media platforms I'm talking about are all, unless you lock down your account, they're basically public spaces. That's great and all, and you get a lot of peanut gallery response, and there's a lot of toxic behavior on Twitter, for example. And so you'll get those kind of responses, right? And I know, as a male, I probably only see a fraction of that, right? And so you know that space, it's only so healthy to stay in there, right, for a while, right? So I kind of limit my time on it. I check it every so often, but I'm not like a multiple times a day or whatever. I don't feel obligated to have to jump on these platforms, right? Instead, what I've done is I've created spaces, like in Slack and other places. You could do this in like a Facebook group or in other kinds of like LinkedIn groups and whatever, where you can have discussion. Any kind of platform that allows you to have discussion, kind of a, I wouldn't say necessarily closed room because you could have people join and stuff, but like a space where you could kind of curate like who shows up initially, right? And I've created spaces like that, and these are not elite groups. These are not like, oh, I need to be a seasoned veteran in the industry to be able to like even get an invite to that group. No, this is not about that. I have people that are like brand new, like just straight out of school, or they haven't even learned design. They want to learn design, all the way to the people who wrote the books about different design things. And this group that I've created, this one particular one I'm thinking of, is there's kind of a shared thing amongst all the folks that I have invited there and other people I've invited, is that they're genuine people, that they don't tend to just debate for the sake of debate, that they have intelligent conversation, they're professional about it, they ask questions that I would call like daring questions. Like, you wouldn't be able to ask that question in Twitter without just getting just sacked by everybody in the design industry for whatever reason. And ask it like, no, I really want to know this. And then you see the responses because of the other folks that is surrounding these individuals and that are posting, including myself. You see these more professional responses. You see kind of interesting insight. You see different lenses, everything from people from different cultures, different parts of the world, and they're adding kind of different angles and insight to this, and you start to get a bigger picture of things, right? And so the answer doesn't become like this, like here's the answer. It's like here's one way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it, and that's those are spaces that I find a lot of value in. And I've created ones for designers like that. I've also created spaces, for example, like I run a Slack group for it's global design conference organizers. So anybody who's ever organized a design conference, come ping me and I'll add you to this. But basically, it helped because we went through a pandemic together. We learned like, okay, what happens when you have a commitment to a venue? How do you back out of that in a pandemic when the federal government and the state or whatever is saying don't have large person events right now? Just all these sort of things. And, so there's a lot of legalese that get discussed. There's a lot of like, okay, now we're sort of crawling out of this pandemic in a lot of ways. And how are events going for other people? What was the turnout? How many tickets did you have and seats did you sell? What percentage were you fully booked? Did you fully sell out? And these are like conversations that usually event organizers wouldn't really share with another event organizer because the perception is that they're our competition. And in this space, it's a safe space, and it stays, the information that is there stays there, right? And in fact, I don't even retain archive because of that. So it allows somebody to be able to share very genuinely, and to hear very candid responses of, yeah, our conference, we basically sold a fraction of the tickets we needed. We hit a massive debt because of this, because of the venue. I think a lot of people don't realize like how thin the margins are on organizing a conference because of the venue and all the other things that go into a conference, you know, as well as speaker fees and stuff. But you know, that said, like you hear like the reality of situations that people are experiencing, and it's like, but you know, we're okay. We put some reserves aside last year. We'll make it through. You know, that kind of thing. And in other conferences, it's like, peace out, everybody. Like, we're no longer doing this event anymore. We're no longer able to, you know, financially, we're not in a situation where we could do this, you know. And you hear, like, you know, okay, this is what happened there. And you learn from that. Again, you know, failures are something to learn from. And I'm not necessarily saying these conferences that stopped are failures. They probably stopped at a good point and made a good, educated, logical decision on that. You know, these are spaces that I learn a lot from the people around me. And I like to surround myself by genuine people that are willing to share their knowledge, and I share my knowledge as much as possible wherever I can, right?
That's super great. You've answered number nine, but I'll ask it. It's around tools. Can you talk a bit about digital and analog?
Yeah. So all sorts of tools. I mean, because I'm, you know, really an advisor and coach slash mentor right now, my tools might be different than, you know, when I was a design manager or whatnot. You know, as a coach, obviously, like I use Zoom. I have used Loom for videos at times when I'm walking somebody through a portfolio when it's asynchronous. But most of the time, I'm there in person, you know, well, digitally there in person. Virtually in person, and you know, walking through stuff with individuals that I'm coaching, and same thing goes with advising. But there's also like a physical, like, let's meet and you know, meet at an office or meet at a shared location or whatever. You know, and that said, like, because of all this, like, I kind of have a series of things I use. um, uh, like, for example, I use I'm gonna get in trouble here because I don't remember the official name of it. It's, oh yeah, it's literally called Analog. It's like a card based system where you write down your to dos of the day and you sort of scratch them off as you get them done. And the nice thing about it is like this beautiful wood crafted box and all this kind of stuff that comes in. And it sits upright in front of you, and it should sit straight forward on your desk, like this is the first thing you see, kind of like looking at the calendar or something like that, or the clock or whatever. It is a very simple system. It doesn't involve software. There is no complicated, how do I take this from analog to digital? You know, there's none of that because it doesn't really need it. You just, like, these are the tasks that are just like day to day. And, you know, like I said, as a stay at home dad, I need good tools for, you know, helping me keep on task and get things done that I need to get done. You know, structuring learning for my daughter, you know, that sort of stuff. And so this is one of those things I use. Another thing I use is actually digital, which is a calendar system. So I just basically use a calendar to kind of block my time. It's like, okay, here's the time I'm going to be doing this. Here's the time I'm going to be doing that. I use a number of like cloud-based solutions, like you know, Google's offerings. You know, so they're Google spreadsheets and that sheets, as they call it. You know, to you know, graph out like a model for, you know, here's how my days and weeks will be essentially. You know, for the most part, I think a lot of it's done through things like as simple as Apple to dos, you know, the reminders and to dos list. I have so many lists because I have a cabin. I have to like think about like what is the food I need to prepare and bring up there. You know, what can actually fit into our vehicle as we go up there, because we actually have to take a track side by side in the snow to get to our cabin. So it's very limited storage space. So I have to like plan through this sort of stuff. And we have like lists of like, okay, here's what's at the cabin, here's what we need to bring, you know, so that we can have the meals that we want to have and all this sort of stuff. So a lot of reminder systems like that. So it might feel like, oh gosh, Nick, you have like three completely different reminder systems, but the way I use them together, they kind of make sense. It kind of works, right? It's not perfect. I definitely don't feel like I'm the most organized person in the world, but these are tools that help me kind of get through my day and navigate what I need to get done. You know, other tools that, you know, people may or may not, you know, want to hear about, I guess, but like, you know, I use, it's kind of interesting. It's a CRM, but it's for essentially like friendships and relationships. I've taken it, it's called Monica. And I've taken it and sort of edited it to be something that I can use with my clients. So I'm able to track like all my, client sessions that I've had, the notes that are both generated by myself as I'm going through the session, as well as Zoom will generate. It's not a transcript. It's a basically they take the transcript and generate kind of an executive summary notes of the entire session. So I'll see some for this session actually, but it's a good way to kind of reflect on that sort of stuff. So I bring that into the CRM so that I can have it all in one spot. And it allows me to, see the person's portfolio, where they're located, what their current job is, all these number of things, when was their last session, etc. Um, for the booking, I use Calendly to book because it's just stupid simple. And I don't need anything complicated. I just need people to basically reserve time on my schedule. And again, because my schedule happens for people that are, being coached, it happens between when my daughter goes to nap and when she wakes up. The last part is a bit of a variable, so I add a bit of flex time in there. But basically allows people to just kind of, whether they're going to use me for an advisor for their business, or whether like today, just before this session, jumping on a call, working with some partners that are in companies that are conglomerate companies that have a number of businesses in a number of industries underneath them, and advising, on design and design operations for that, so they could book time, my clients could book time that are coaching with me, and anybody else, right? And it's a pretty good tool. You get, the deeper you go into it, the more you find value in just different nuances on the product. Like I get schedule multi-group sessions, like I'm doing on Friday. Basically a number of people can join the session, and it's a different cost point. It's way more affordable. And they get to not only hear like my advice to whatever challenge they're running into, but they get to hear other people's challenges and in my advice to those folks. So they could use it if they're also running the same thing, or if they end up like, someday I might run into that same challenge. That's good to know how Nick suggested to kind of navigate that. So it's kind of a shared learning space. And that can actually be booked through Calendly. So it's like, great, I could do that. I use a Google Calendar to store all that sort of stuff and share bookings, etc. Trying to think of some of the other tools, but those are the high level ones. I hand code my own CMS. Or sorry, not my own CMS, my own website. So I don't use a CMS on my website. It's a flat file website. I know a lot of people think that's weird, but I have full control over the design. I can do whatever I want on any given screen. There's, no templating, even though I can have it consistent. There's ability to kind of break the grid where I need to break the grid, that sort of stuff. So, there's not a lot of other tools I use on a given day-to-day basis. I guess Sublime Text is maybe one of those, because I'm editing the code in it. I Yeah, Slack is one I mentioned. There's a lot of social media platforms that I use, but those are the high levels.
Nice. And I'm excited for number 10, which is around work-life balance. How do you deal with it?
Yeah. Yeah. My philosophy is very strong about work life balance. And this might be, again, like we talk about like things that happened in the past shape who we are today. I feel like I'm very strong headed about work life balance, because of the experiences I've lived through. I had one employer where, basically, if you were a designer on the team, you had to basically book a certain number of hours in a given week that were billable towards a client. And it was sort of free agent world. So you had to like make sure you worked with certain principal partner directors. Not trying to give away too much here, but to win those projects, to be on that team, to have those billable hours.
Mm.
Um, and in my role was it was that plus, by the way, Nick, you also have to manage a team, and by the way, you also have to lead our competency for user experience design, and that's going to equate to this many hours, and that was far in excess of 40 hours a week. And in addition to that, there was a lot of boots on the ground sort of stuff. This is pre-pandemic and all that. They wanted me to be boots on the ground. They literally like sent me to the client location, and I'd be in their office, sitting there amongst the team, working with the team, for weeks on end sometimes. And that works out fine if it's a local Seattle client. But when it's not, there's travel involved, and that travel for the business, even though the business is paying for the travel, has to be done outside of business hours. So basically, my weekends got flanked on each end for travel, and sometimes that's a lot of distance, and so it's a lot of travel. And you can kind of imagine how it really just killed my work-life balance, right? And then moving forward in my career, like I worked at a company where they basically run on a performance model, and the performance, well, they say it's not, you're not against the peers at the same level. Like, so if you're a senior designer, you're not against you're not being compared against another senior designer at the same level, and how much they accomplished in the quarter versus how much you accomplished. They say they don't do that, but ultimately when you look at the review sessions and how they go, that's what's happening, right? So it fosters this environment where you need to basically work extra hours to get more stuff done than your sort of competitors, so to speak, your, which should be your team, right? Your partners, right? And that culture can get really toxic really fast, all the way to the level of, like, whoever is your boss basically pushing you towards a direction to spend more hours in the office, that sort of thing. And then hiring talent that might be younger because they don't really have established families and a spouse and all this stuff to have to sort of answer to, that they can just be there working crazy hours and providing things in the office, like even like sleep spaces in the office, which is horrible, right? So my philosophy has always been, no, work your 40 hours. So when it's 5 o'clock, I'm kicking you out of the office. And the people that have worked with me before can attest to this. I will literally go into the area where different designers are sitting and say, hey, I see you're here, it's past 5, well, how's it going, and check in with them and basically help them understand that the work will be there tomorrow. It's okay. It's okay to go home and have a life, right? And that's how I run as a leader. I think that is sometimes opposed to other executive leadership's view on it. And maybe that gets me into trouble. But I find that, if we look at the research and actual data on this, you find that an average worker is really only productive for about maybe 30 hours a week at maximum, right? And some people say it's actually a lot less than that, like 25 or something like that. Um, this rings true. I've done experiments, right? Like when I ran my own agency, we started doing the work from home on Fridays during the summer because that way people are already home and they didn't have to deal with traffic and all this stuff, and they could just start the weekend. And then we decided, what if we did? You don't have to work on Fridays, and we did it, and we found productivity actually went up. So not only were they working less hours, but they were actually basically producing more work, but still working less hours. They weren't working late. We weren't having them stay late nights and making up for the missing day or any of that kind of craziness. We didn't cut their salaries based on the change of hours or whatever. We basically just said, you get the same salary. You still need to go home when it's 5 o'clock, and you'll find yourself being more productive. You'll get more accomplished. You'll have a sense of, I delivered something this week, kind of thing. And when you look at the research, it holds true. And when you look at the results, it holds true. And just recently, there's been more studies done. I think there was like a study in Japan on this. So I think this whole idea of even the workday is kind of a flawed mental way to look at things. It made sense maybe in a different era of things when businesses, weren't all, the way they operate today. There wasn't the internet, all this sort of stuff. But today I feel like work from wherever you want, work the hours that make sense for your time zone. And we have the tools and asynchronous capabilities to work with you. And we don't have to be face to face all the time. And this whole BS about like, oh, there's that serendipitous conversation that happens around the water cooler. Yeah, okay, get a chat tool and just leave it open, like, right? There's so many ways to talk to somebody and have a mention and just casual conversation if you need to. Some companies will even do this thing where you could do like a portal, like you basically open essentially like a video call with another office or another location. So if you're working remote from home, you basically have a video at your desk and you could look over to your other colleague and you could share something like, hey, look at this design or whatever, because you can see they're actually at their desk. I feel like that's like, a little creepy, from the home standpoint, because it's a little invasion of privacy in some ways. But that said, like, there is this notion that like, oh, because you're not physically there, people aren't going to think to talk to each other. It's like, humans are great creatures. We've evolved over time. We are capable of doing a lot of things. Some stuff may surprise you. I feel like the ploy of the water cooler is really businesses trying to hold on to their financial investment in physical real estate property. And like that era has passed. I know a lot of companies are like return to work and even look at like the business publications out there and stuff. It's like, how, when are we going to start returning to work? And like they're all basically saying like this is happening, but when you look at the workforce, they're like, this is not happening, right? And so there's a lot of push and pull there. Ultimately, yeah, business pays the paycheck, so there's a lot of push and leverage with that. But at the same time, when it becomes no longer an employer market like it is right now, it's an extreme employer market right now. But when it starts to shift back to an employee market, you'll probably see that well, people vote with their feet, and if you are going to force people into this kind of sort of legacy environment sort of thing of how they need to work, you're going to find a lot of resistance to it and then a lot of departures. You're going to see a lack of retention, basically. And I think that's going to ring true for many years to come before businesses start to realize if this task doesn't have to be done physically in person with a group of other people, then why do we need to have them in an office, right? That's just, I have strong opinions on that, as you can see. But this all plays out into the work-life balance because now that I'm at home and a stay-at-home dad, obviously I'm not commuting much. But when I made that transition to be working from home, and the pandemic fostering this, I saw how many hours I spent in commuting, whether I was driving on my own or taking, transit. It was just countless hours and traffic and congestion, and they can't make freeways any wider than they already are, and like, all the things that go with that. And it's just like, yeah, like that just burned into your personal life, right? Because you don't start the clock until you're at the office. Now, some people have done a thing where it's like, I'm going to just clock in once I get on the public transit because I'll have my laptop there and all this sort of stuff. Great, props to you. But that said, like I just feel like this whole notion that everybody needs to get up and go to work every day and into this office and do this work in a digital environment, and when the work is digital, it just doesn't make any sense. So it's really a resistance, right? A business resistance. And I think we could look back at the business, and we can, in fact, look back at the business publications of ages ago and see the resistance for just the internet. Oh, it's a fad. Nobody, don't start a business on the internet. It's just a thing. Nobody's really on there, right? And then lo and behold, like it made sense. It just made logical sense, right?
Nice, absolutely. Yeah, super great. We are just past halfway here with number 11, and the question is, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Yeah. Somebody asked me this in a prior interview once. And I think I said like a trail guide because, just, being in the mountains, I love trails and all this kind of stuff. But, I think right now, like the way I look at what I'm doing now and kind of the tipping point that I'm at right now in my career and where the different avenues I can take things, um, you know, uh, has given me a chance to kind of rethink this question basically to something like a little bit deeper. And the way I look at it is, if I wasn't doing design right now, I would probably be in some role helping people in their careers, in their lives, helping them accomplish things, helping them grow. I might be an educator, I might be a counselor, I might be, some kind of coach. I could even be a sports coach. I mean, who knows, right? And that's what I would have been doing if if design didn't exist. But today, if I was like, okay, today, Nick, you're not going to be a designer, you're not going to be in the design industry, that's just going to vaporize tomorrow. Um, I think I'm still going to do what I do today for the most part. I think I'm still going to advise businesses because I think, even if the craft of design vaporizes with artificial intelligence as people fear or whatever, which I mean, sure, I get the theory there, but it's pretty far off. That said, I think the important thing to understand is when you look at what design is, it's a communication tool. It's a marketing tool. It's an advertising tool. It's a way to relay information, sometimes complex information, multiple data points, right? Um, I think communication is still going to be a thing, right? So I don't think it's going to go away. So I think the difference would be is if today I couldn't be a designer and design didn't exist, I think tomorrow I might be somebody that helps people grow, be and become better, communicators through different tools and avenues, right? So I don't know if that really is a job yet, but maybe it will be someday.
Perfect. I love it. 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
What would I not like to do with my career? I think what I would not like to do is to take all my experience, 25 years in industry, 14 years of managing teams and organizations, and just throw it away and just say, this isn't of value. There's no thing here that other people could benefit from or could utilize or could help them. To take the tribal knowledge I've gained through different companies, through working with different individuals, to working on different products and using different tools, and just saying that doesn't matter. That's what I would not like to do. I think I would not like to give up that what I have, what I've built in my career that I could share with others to help them be maybe even more successful than I am. And not that I'm successful. I think successful is like all a matter of you know personal subjective opinion about what success looks like. Some people think it's about dollars and money and how big of a company you have or whatever. I don't really see success that way. I see success as when I have helped somebody become better at doing something or help them grow in their careers and achieve some sort of become a manager, become a director, or own their own business or something like that. That's success. That's what success looks like for me and what I do, right? So I wouldn't want to give that up. I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to give up all that knowledge and insight. I feel like that's probably my greatest asset, and I share it freely.
Perfect. And 13, do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that some of the folks that follow me have probably heard this 100 times, me say this quote, but I'll say it again here because it is. This is largely a misattributed quote to a certain particular president, not recent, but it actually comes from the actress Mary Pickford. Um, and it's been paraphrased in a number of different ways. So I'm going to say it the way I say it, which is failure isn't falling down. Failure is not getting up. And I heard that once and I was like, man, that is so spot on, right? And I look back to, all the things in my, life and all the things I've experienced and how I've learned and how I've grown from things and how failure has it sort of driven me in certain directions and different things like that. Yeah, it's like getting back up and learning from that. I think is probably the most important thing. So I love that quote. I use it wherever I can. I use it with my clients. It's an important thing, and I think it really resonates with like even successful people. Like some examples. Michael Jordan was kicked off his basketball team. I think Albert Einstein was told he was emotionally slow from his first grade teacher or something like that. Disney's business was a complete failure until it finally took off, right? The list goes on, right? I think people that are recognized at doing amazing things are people who have understood that failure is just a thing that does occur, and taking it and learning from it and growing from it, right? And I think the people that I see kind of what I would describe as stagnate. Like they do their thing and they're just there, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with continuing to do the same thing every day, so to speak. But are the people who believe that failure isn't something to be talked about, something that shouldn't be shared, something that you can't really learn from, or that it only is one thing, one way to not do something or whatever, like cool, but I think there's so much value in sharing, and there's so much value in just personally learning from it. And it really speaks to the individual's personality on how they look at failure, right? The people who are like, I don't talk about failure, I don't like to share about failure, even when directly asked by, like in an interview. I remember an individual in an interview, and the interviewer was really skilled, and he kept coming back to it and kept coming back to it, and he just refused to give any kind of answer on failure, and basically said, I'm not going to waste this air on that. Um, and I look at their personality and I look at the challenges they've had in their career, even since that interview, and it really connected the dots for me. It's like that person is this way, and that's okay. That's who they are. But that's not somebody I'm going to surround myself with, right?
Nice. And I imagine you have a 14. What's your favorite, least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Oh, least favorite word, quote, or sentence. Yeah, that I was thinking about that, and I was kind of trying to think of like what is the one thing that I feel like has connected me with something that I'm like, this we need to stop doing this. Um, I think, and this is gonna make probably a room full of designers laugh here, but is we've already tried that. And that's because you have people joining companies all the time, and you have the legacy people that have been there for, like, ages. And yeah, we tried this and we did that product and it was a failure and all this kind of stuff. Every day things change. Every day new technology gets created. Every day there's more people online. Every day it's a different world, right? And if you look at, here's this thing we did, and it's always going to fail the same way, then you're really never going to ever risk trying, right? And I've seen several times where something was a total failure at one point, and the company completely folded and just disappeared. And then, 5 years later, another company pretty much did the almost exact same thing, and it was a huge success. And it was
Mm.
just because of the industry, the where we were at with technology, where people, what people were working on, like a number of factors. When you look at like even just technology, Bill Buxton has a great talk on this, about sort of how innovation happens in certain technology, and he basically shows, like, I think he was talking about like the smartphone or something like that, but part of it was like reduced chip size. Part of it was touchscreen. Part of it was, GPS and grid network kind of thing, satellite network, etc., and cellular network. All these different things. And he showed, like, I remember one particular slide ring true, which was the first ever touchscreen that he could ever find any kind of image of. And it was this. It wasn't like a CRT. I remember old computer screens. They used to be really deep and really boxy.
Mm.
Um, it was like that amplified 5 times. It was like this super long machine of a screen, and it was because the screen had to project on something else, and then that other thing was the thing that pulled in the depth, and it was this huge contraption that would take up a massive desk, um, and that was the first touch screen.
Mm.
And the way it was that way is because of the technology they had, the capability, how circuits were designed, the amount of what is it, millimeters, micrometers, whatever that chips could be made, etc. That's what was manifested because of that. And then you take that and bring it into, hey, now technology is different. We have this, the chips are smaller, blah blah blah. We could do circuits this way. You could compact all this sort of stuff. Systems on chip, etc. And then, hey, we could do this in our pocket, right? Which is just mind blowing, right? And I think that's the thing that, like, we need to look at, like, when we think of you know this has been done before.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just think of, things are dynamic. you know let's try something. Maybe we take a slightly different angle on it. Maybe we explore that as, iterative variation A, and we'll do a variation B of this approach that will be different and maybe a little more, reduced risk, because we knew what we learned from that previous failure, etc. And you might find things are pretty surprising. Things that may have failed before actually succeed today. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, there's a lot of great insight in just like learning from that. So
Awesome. And 15, one word to describe yourself. What word?
um, so personality wise, I'm kind of struggling with which one to say here, but like personality wise, I would say I'm a genuine person. Like, I don't tend to BS people. I don't tend to play tricks on them. I don't want to, like, even people I'm interviewing with, I never try to like throw a curveball at them, because I just feel like that's not genuine, right? Like, that's not really how things work. Yeah, when you work, there's always going to be curveballs that come at you in some ways, and
Mhm.
but that said, it's like, do we need to do this to a candidate who's already super nervous, already stressed, already kind of wondering if they're going to be able to move forward,
Mhm.
maybe in a situation in their life where they need to land this job, financial or otherwise. It's just like, we, need to be genuine people, I think,
Mhm.
in that space. And so for me, like, as an individual, how I work with my clients, how I work with my business partners, and everybody else, like, I try to be as genuine and true to myself as I can be. And that makes me who I am, and it may not work for everybody, right? And that's okay. But I feel like that probably is the best word. Now, if I was to go and do like research and kind of try to categorize and, do analysis of who I am, you might say I'm a connector. I connect people
Mhm.
to other people, connect people to services and experiences and products and things that they'll find useful for what they're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
Like, hey, you're going to do this thing for, it's like an information architecture process. Did you know there's this tool that can actually do part of that for you? It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, right? Just that is like, to me, is like super helpful, like, for that person, and I get excited about being able to like have helped them on that, right? Even if it's just a simple minutia thing like that.
Mhm.
So I am a connector when I did that analysis, but I don't know if connector is like the way I would describe myself. So I think genuine is the word I would go for.
That's great. 16, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, what keeps me up at night? I'll tell you, it's not artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
What keeps me up at night is probably closer to capitalism than anything else. I think there's some massive benefits of capitalism. I think there's also some massive challenges with it. And I think a lot of businesses incentivize employees certain ways, and it starts to drive behavior and culture in certain ways, and starts to drive business, and starts to drive how businesses operate with customers, and
Mhm.
ultimately impacts customers' experience.
Mhm.
Like, there's a ripple down effect there, right?
Mhm.
And so I worry, because the capitalistic engine is largely driven by advertising and marketing,
Mhm.
right? And this that industry has such a foothold that people don't even really realize how big of a foothold. Like,
Mhm.
people will say, like, oh, well, Facebook, they're a digital company. They're not a marketing company. They're not a, advertising company, but they are.
Mhm.
Google is an advertising company, right?
Mhm.
Like, there's all the, and we just keep going, and it's about sharing of data, of information about individuals and all this sort of stuff. And it's like interesting that the was it the UK has implemented a process to kind of cap down on, like, hey, what information you can share about your customers with other vendors, etc. Privacy and respecting personal data, etc. Where the US has not really done anything in that regard. Has pretty much left it wide open in a lot of ways. I'll give you a couple examples. There's certain things, certain phrases and words that I would say in a personal conversation with me and another individual in a room with smart devices in the room
Mhm.
that do have microphones, and the companies claim we're not recording anything, and yet The reality is information has been sent, and that's been proven.
Mm,
As well as I will start seeing ads for this crazy thing that I literally only vocally said and never searched for, never did any kind of thing that could send a data signal, a single data signal about that particular thing. And it's a very, you know, specific thing, right? And boom, I'm getting ads about it.
mm,
Makes you wonder what is
mm,
really going on here. How
mm,
much of our freedom have we given up to
mm,
businesses and marketing engine and advertising engine? And I'm not to say this, I'm not here to say like, oh, these are all bad and we shouldn't have these things, but like, I think, because it funds individuals, right? Like it gives people paychecks, right? Technology gives people paychecks.
mm,
Uh, but at the same time, I also worry where we would see ourselves in the future if this keeps going at the escalating pace it's going at, right?
mm, mm,
What is tomorrow going to look like? I'm afraid of that. That keeps me up at night. And it's not just the Black Mirror sort of stuff or whatever. It's deeper than that. It's far more like rooted in every aspect of the way humans operate, right?
mm,
Um, that scares me. That
mm.
really scares me.
Final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
It's a dream I'm chasing. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm at this weird tipping point, so it's like kind of hard to say like a specific dream. I mean, yeah, it'd be great. Like if Craft and Rigor had a lot more clients, I'd be like super stoked about that, right?
Mm,
But is that like the ultimate dream for me? Like I don't really know. I think you know I really enjoy doing what I'm doing right now, and if I could keep doing it and make enough revenue for my family to be able to like get my daughter back in daycare and like pay the mortgages and all this kind of stuff, great, then awesome.
mm,
That would be great. That would be a dream for me, right? um, but right now I'm kind of at this apex point, not apex point, but I call it a fork in the road with many forks, many paths to choose from, and it's just a matter of like which one is going to exhibit a potential of being successful first,
mm,
and that might be the path I take. So you might see me maybe running a product company, maybe running another
mm,
agency, maybe growing Craft and Rigor from a coaching standpoint, maybe growing Craft and Rigor from a consulting standpoint.
mm,
It's
mm,
hard to say. I think for me though is the big, I guess if I had to summarize the dream for the vagueness that is in front of me right now, the ambiguity that is like I sit before the sea of, I think the biggest thing is I want to get to a point where I could essentially retire and look back and see all the successful folks that I've helped in different ways.
mm, mm. That's great. What inspires you?
I think what inspires me, given the number of folks I've talked to, and you could imagine being a hybrid coach slash mentor in the current, you know, market, job market in tech and beyond tech. A lot of my clients, share like their personal life story of what their challenges they're facing and that sort of stuff. And, what really inspires me is, and I know this has kind of been overused word, but I think it's true. It's the resilience of humans, the resilience of people that have been, defeated in a lot of ways and still get up the next morning and try, and push and keep trying to figure out how to get through this barrier that's in front of them, right? Um, so, seeing the passion and drive behind people, that's what inspires me.
Advice, any advice you'd like to share?
Uh, I think the thing that I would say to most folks is don't try to be somebody you're not. Be genuine to yourself. Be true to yourself. You be you, right? It's the overused phrase, but it's really true. Like I think a lot of people are afraid to share who they are and how they like to think and what they like to do and how they would typically respond to something. And behind this, like how does the business want me to operate? How does society want me to operate? I think it diminishes their character, right?
Mm,
um and I know they don't necessarily choose that, but they might not have a choice, right? Like
mm,
But I think the biggest thing is like be true to who you are.
Mhm.
If you're trying to accomplish something, you know, the biggest force working against you is yourself, right? So if you really have that drive, you're going to achieve what you need to achieve. You know, because the human spirit's like unstoppable.
That's great. And the promo piece, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? Do we go to Craft and Rigor? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, you could keep tabs on my business at craftandrigor.com. All spelled out, no ampersand, even though the branding is ampersand. And then you could also find me on nickfinck.com.
Mm,
So that's NICKFINCK. .com. That's my personal site. There might be some changes coming up in the future because I'm kind of moving all my coaching, mentoring stuff over to Craft and Rigor. Some of it's on my personal site still. But that's where I'm at, in terms of how to get a hold of me and whatnot. And there's a few other avenues, but yeah, you could follow me on Twitter. Again, it can be a very toxic space. I don't necessarily feel it's healthy for everybody,
mm,
especially using it like a lot. Uh,
mm,
Threads, I felt for a while had been pretty, like far less toxic. I'll say it that way.
mm,
But I am on there. I tend to be pretty active on there. So you could find me on Threads. I think I'm just at nick.finck, so nick.finck.
mm,
Um, and then on LinkedIn, if you just want to reach out, maybe, I don't know. There's a number of ways to have a conversation with me. I think the biggest thing is whatever platform you want to reach out and connect with me, just make sure you start with what specifically it is that you want to
mm,
get out of the conversation. Because I get a lot of like, hey, Nick, do you have time for a coffee chat or whatever? It's like, why? Like, what do you want to chat about? Are you going to sell me something? What am I, are you trying to offer me a job? Like, I don't know. And so it helps me get expectations, but also helps me be able to respond. A lot of times I find people contact me wanting to get a piece of information or a specific point, of data, and I'm actually not the best person for it. And so I will
mm,
be quickly, referring along other people in the industry of all sorts of backgrounds, that have deeper experience in that thing that person is trying to get to. So I'm the first person to kind of defer on people to other folks, where it makes sense. But yeah, you could find me posting occasionally on LinkedIn.
mm,
I think you might find more often posts on Threads.
mm,
So if you're looking for like, I want to see and hear a lot about this stuff, that's where it will be.
mm,
And then beyond that, I would say just reach out on one of my two sites and send me a message, and let's chat over email. I always feel like I want to express that I have my office door open. I'm always
mm,
wanting to like talk to folks about things, even
mm,
if it's just a mutual pep talk for each other, right, or whatever. I have people that I know in the industry that we just like every once in a while get on a call together or a video call, and it's just like sharing what's going on in each other's lives, and we're both in tech and all this kind of stuff, and just like, here's my challenges I face today, and here's my challenges I face today, and just kind of riffing on that, and just kind of allowing a space to be able to share that kind of stuff is just nice. But yeah, follow me on this podcast. Once live, I will link from my personal site. I know it's a little bit outdated right now for some of my podcast interviews, but that will be like right on the homepage.
great.
And then yeah, email me if you need anything.
Wow, great. Okay, well, thank you so much. What a refreshing response to the 20 questions and a return to the kind of long form response, which I can't remember if we talked about it, but some of our most successful episodes are the longer ones. So this will be potentially a really good one. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for having me again. And it just I love the uniqueness of this. This is great.
Thanks.